Ao conhecimento.
I start out by thinking about schools and curriculum and teaching in a relational manner. That is, we can only understand what is crucial about schools if we connect it to the relations of dominance and subordination in the larger society. It only focuses on one part of what is a larger dialectic. We must also talk about the resistances, the struggles of movements and real people in their daily lives. That causes two kinds of questions to be raised in my mind and many people in Brazil as well. How do we understand power in all its complexity? Since education is a relationship of power, knowledge is declared official. And some groups' knowledge is thought about as simply popular, as unimportant. Some groups' policies are put in place, and other groups' policies are never talked about.
Yes.
And some groups get respect if they have money and power, and we are watching teachers lose the respect and be attacked throughout the world. So the first question is, who has power and how do they use it? Now that is a question of understanding. But the second question is just as important. How do we understand power and inequality, but how do we interrupt it? And how do we understand it and interrupt it, not just in what we have called cultural politics? We must understand how these interact with each other. So the task that I have set for myself is to look at these relations, but not simply to look at them critically, but also to act as the secretary of the people who are struggling against this in schools and communities and movements in every nation in the world. So part of the task of any critical educator, not simply to do the critical analysis, but we must act as the voice of the people who are silent. Let me say one thing about voice first. One has a voice. Subaltern always speak. Dominant groups don't listen. So that is crucial because I think we make social movements from below, we infantilize them by saying they are silent. And anyone who knows anything in Brazil about the landless movement or the movement around Afro-Brazilian rights and struggles, the movements in favelas, anyone who understands this also knows that no one is silent. So part of the task, it seems to me, is to have dominant groups listen to the voices that are powerful. And that means we must study how the powerful work very hard to have only their voice heard. So in some of my books, I look not simply at what goes on in the curriculum and pedagogy in school, though that is absolutely crucial. Who controls the media? Reality is partly formed by the discourses that circulate. And we can think of people listening to 100 radio stations, but 99 of them are talking about neoliberalism and neoconservatism, and only one station is counter-hegemonic. We must understand how the right then controls the social discourse. So one of the strange points I want to make, in almost a paradox, we must study how the right in all of our nations has been able to define whose voice is powerful. And that means we must work with the media so that the social voices from the movements are made more visible, just as the right is brilliant at using the media, brilliant at getting their knowledge in schools. And here is the paradox. We study the right to find out how to interrupt it. The far right was never at the center of power in many nations. But the most radical economic theories now are at the very center of all of our nations. How did that happen? We study the right to find out how you make discourse popular. We do not manipulate reality in the cynical way that they do it. They are absolutely brilliant. They understand Gramsci better than the left. That in order to win in the state, you must win in civil society. And that the struggle over consciousness and knowledge is absolutely crucial. So, oddly enough, I now spend a good deal of my time analyzing the brilliance of neoliberalism. It makes me very sick, but we must study we must always assume that our enemies are not stupid.
Mas
Use that to talk for 1 minute about university. It is social movements that transform society. There are social movements that have mobilized around universities.
e há
Anti-racist movements, movements among women, disability rights movements,
os movimentos
movements coming up from impoverished people, demanding that the university be open to all of them.
que temos,
And we must stand in solidarity with all of them, because all of them are crucial.
porque na,
But the right has understood how you demobilize social movements. So in my own university, as an example,
por exemplo,
it costs much more now than it did 5 years ago to go to it.
o custo anos,
It is $10,000 now
a verdade,
for a public university,
e é,
meaning that many poor black people cannot go.
ou seja,
It means that single mothers cannot go.
significa que
But the university is now being turned into a commodity. Students are called our customers.
e os
So the university is like a television set or a bottle of Argentinian wine. It is a luxury.
é,
It is not a human right.
não é
Because of that, new identities are formed on the part of students and professors. Students are consumers. That identity says, I am no longer raced or classed or gendered.
essa identidade.
So in the very heart of the university, it is much harder to form social movements
É muito
in two ways.
em
Not there because the people are now marginalized,
os
so wealthier people go.
pessoas mais idade,
But once they get there, they are consumers. The disease of individualism dominates the university. And that disease infects professors too.
e essa
So the relationship is complicated.
complexa.
This is again why we must understand how people who are often very progressive become less progressive in many of our institutions.
Acaba
But it also shows how important universities are. Let me be a little more personal for 1 minute. I come from the third poorest city in the United States and went to schools that were underfunded and falling apart. And I became a teacher in those exact same schools that I was taught.
e eu
As a student in those schools, I was angry all the time because I come from a family of working class activism, and I was invisible in the curriculum, and my entire tradition was invisible.
e toda
But my brother and I were the only white children in that school, and everyone else was invisible as well.
escola
And the teachers kept teaching even though we were angry and would disrupt the class. I say this because there is a danger of our thinking about this as only from critical theory. Theory is connected to hundreds of years of struggle, and it is useless unless it connects to the real experiences of teachers and children, and to the struggles of social movements to transform their lives and the lives of their children.
e